Namaste. Welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World, whatever site you're tapping into. And today I'm going to continue with my little exercise of answering questions that are quite deep and profound, related to what we might call a spiritual practice. And let's not get too hung up in terminology. Spiritual practice is basically just our quest for personal development, for being the best people we can be. It is also our quest for greater understanding of what life is all about and what's really important. And it is about learning to tame the mind that so often gets us into a lot of trouble and causes a lot of suffering. So when I say it's part of my quest for spiritual development, that's what I'm referring to. I'm going to encourage you all to do this exercise. Get a bunch of what you consider to be spiritual questions, get them from other people, or search the net like I had done for several of these questions to see what kind of spiritual question a spiritual master would get asked, and do your best to try to answer it, and try to answer it within a time frame so that you know that it has to be concise and to the point. So that's what I'm doing here, and I encourage everyone to do that if they're hoping to gain a better understanding of things or to assimilate their learning into a way that helps them to advance along their path. So I have selfish reasons for doing this, but I also think that there might be some benefit for you, the listener, to hear what I have to say. Not that I am a spiritual master by any means, because I'm not, and I can't pretend to be, but nor am I a spiritual teacher, really. I'm a learner who learns through teaching. So, off track, let's get back to the question at hand. So I have several questions in this handy dandy jar. I am going to pull one out, and I am going to do my best to answer it within the 10-minute time frame. I will start the clock before I even read, so that is included in part of the process. So, well, here we go. What is the most damaging view we can hold as human beings, and how does it impact us and the world around us? What is the most damaging view we can hold as human beings, and how does it impact us and the world around us? Before I answer every question, I take a deep breath to kind of reconnect to myself, trying to ground myself so that the question goes beyond the ego and is answered at a deeper level. What is the most damaging view we can have as human beings, and how does it impact us in the world? I think the most damaging view we can have as human beings is the fact that we are separate. And when I use that word separate, I mean that we seem to separate ourselves into little entities called personal selves. And we see that the bodies that we're in, the body lines, somehow separate us from the body lines of other beings, be they human, sentient, or non-sentient. Our idea of separation, that we are these bodies, we are these minds, these personalities we have identified with, come from years of collective conditioning, from what we were taught as children, from what our ancestors were taught, because whatever they were taught is somehow in us genetically, I believe. We are actually a copulation of so many different people, so many different ideas, so many different concepts, so many different thoughts, so many different feelings, so many different images. So as this form copulation, or this copulation of form, be it in the form of a physical body, a mind, a thought, a concept, a feeling, we have come to see ourselves as separate. This is me, that is you. This is me, that is the big them. No one really ever can define who the them is in life, right? But there's always a them and a they. They said, they do. This is me, and that is everything else outside of me, the world. When we have this idea that we are separate little entities, born into this world, we become very vulnerable. We begin to see ourselves as very fragile, vulnerable, in a very dangerous environment. We begin to see ourselves as needing to defend and attack for the purpose of keeping this little self-entity alive. Now, we are all, as beings on this planet, equipped with a desire to live, a primal inclination to do whatever we can to survive. It is our purpose here, to some extent, naturally and genetically, to keep going and to keep ensuring that the species continues, right? So that is a very scientific and natural part of us, to want to survive. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But what happens is when we identify with this separate little tiny thing called me, this clump of flesh and this mind, this personality, the roles this personality plays, the jobs it has, the things it owns, the neighborhood it lives in, the people it affiliates with, its beliefs, its ideas, its religion, its politics. When we identify with that as who we are, we create a border around us and other people. We are separate, and as long as we are separate without the pack support, we are going to be vulnerable, are we not? We are going to be more apt to need to defend and attack for our survival. Because if there's a me, there's a them, like I said, there's an us, there's a we, there's a it, and all that is not us, we believe, if we think of ourselves as separate, has the potential of harming us and creating problems for us. When that happens, we are going to feel very, very nervous, if that's the word I want to use, or very, very unsure of ourselves. We're going to feel insecure in this world that keeps changing around us, this world that we have come to perceive as negative, as bad, as dangerous. If I have an idea in my mind, this view in my mind, which is a wrong view according to Buddhist tradition, that I am separate, I am a separate self, then I am not going to feel the oneness of connection, the security and safety and solidity of being a human being on this planet. Everything's going to be unpredictable because everything around us is unpredictable, right? Everything's changing. There's nothing in this world of form that lasts. It comes, it goes, you know. We're not only going to have sunshine, but we're going to have storms in our lives. We're not only going to have love, but we're going to have love taken away from us through death or illness or a lack of love. We're never going to be secure in a separate self, in a little body. This body is going to be, if we consider ourselves as the body, always going to be at the risk of injury, illness, and death. And that creates a great deal of fear in us as separate entities. But it also creates a great deal of fear in the world. And if I'm fearful, my brother is fearful. And if I see myself as this, equipped with this body and mind and this religiosity or belief system, and that person over there is a separate self in a religiosity and belief system, and their religiosity, politics, belief system, geographical area, race, gender is different than mine, because we're both seeing ourselves as separate entities. Well, and we're both at the mercy of attack from each other. Well, then our defenses are going to become so that we're going to see things like walls being built up between countries, war, unfair distribution of the wealth, you know, discrimination, prejudice. So my view of me as a separate self does not just affect me, it affects the entire planet. I feel as well as a separate self that I have a right to use, manipulate, and take from the natural world as I see fit to ensure my survival as a separate entity. So I therefore, in a sense, rape and plunge and pillage the world, destroying the planet in order to meet the needs of this separate little self. And if we have a bunch of people believing they're separate little selves, but maybe are connected by ideology and belief systems or geography, and nationality, then what might happen is that we'll have a collection of these tiny little selves. And a collection of tiny little selves seeing themselves separate are still looking out at the thems and the theys and the its as being potentially dangerous to them, so they will attack them. And that's where the war comes in. That's where the strong division between nations comes in. That's where the inequality comes in. So having a view that we are separate is probably the worst view we can have, because it is the view that takes us to the root probably of all suffering, the clinging, the grasping, and the aversion in order to keep ourselves surviving. We all want to survive. We all want to be alive. We all want to promote what's ours. When in all actuality, there is no me or my or mine to life. There is just life expressing itself. You don't see nature. I mean, you see species coming together, but you don't see them forming groups against other groups. You don't see the animals in the woods, you know, doing whatever they can to promote their ideology and their belief systems of separation. I know Darwin said promoted the survival of the species, saying that the strongest are always going to survive and the weakest will die off. And so we have a competitive model that we base our human conditioning on, our human actions on, our human decisions on. But I am more in favor of the idea that we and nature are cooperative in its need to depend on one another in order to survive, rather than on this idea that we're separate cells fighting for survival. Look at the body. There's trillion cells in your body, but and every one of those cells is connected to the other cell in some way. They're all working together to ensure your survival. They're not competing. If they did compete, then you would not be here now. So nature, and you look at nature, the same thing. We see a cooperation and a fulfillment of needs through cooperation. Separation is just an illusion, and we can put that away in order to have a better view, but not only that, to have a better world. Well, that's all I have to say. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for joining. As you can see, my time is out. Namaste.